We're going to begin this morning once again by reading the same passage, James 4 7 through 10. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double minded. Be wretched, mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Sometimes things just work out perfectly, and today is one of them. I did not schedule our James study to arrive at this passage today. It just happened that way. But if I had been picking a passage from James for Good Friday, this would have been the exact verse that I would have landed on. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. The previous passage that we looked at on Wednesday, the call to cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, double-minded. This, as we mentioned, is a imperative that centers in the temple, in the ritual cleansing of those who are coming to worship God, and the ritual baths that were taken, so that the person entering into the worship of God at the temple would be cleansed and pure. We noted its link to Psalm 24, which deals with the temple. So if that set of imperatives of cleansing your hands and purifying your hearts were the words of the priest, our passage today are the words of the prophet. And in these words, we hear the commands of God's prophets to his people. Prophets like Joel, which we read at the beginning of Lent on Ash Wednesday, which was a call to mourn and weep for our sin, not to take our sin lightly, but to take full responsibility for it, to be repulsed by it, to mourn for its darkness and its consequences. And so again, at the end of Lent, today on Good Friday, we are confronted with this call again. But it is not just the Old Testament prophets that call for us to mourn and to weep. Jesus does as well. We remember his words in Luke chapter 6, verse 25, calling to those who do not take sin seriously. He says, "Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep." This is contrasted with his words in Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. To those who will take sin seriously, he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Today is a day to mourn. Today is a day of fasting and mourning. To mourn the evil that runs rampant in the world, to mourn the sin in our brothers and sisters that harms them and breaks their soul and their relationships. But not just mourn what we see out in the world and in others. Today is a day to mourn what we find inside of ourselves as well. Our own sin that hinders our relationships, that keeps us from worshiping God as we should. Today is a day to mourn our sin and the role that we played in our own hearts and actions in putting Christ on the cross. This morning is not a act of self-flagellation. It is not an attempt to earn favor. In fact, it is a recognition that even in our mourning, we cannot fix our problems. We cannot erase sin. No amount of even lamentation and weeping and fasting takes away the sin. It is a recognition that we are in many ways impotent, and we recognize and mourn that fact. But today we also recognize the fact that there is, though it does not lie in ourselves, there is hope for us, for someone else can do the work for us. Just before we started today, I was reading a Lenten devotional and I read these words. Good Friday is the day when you can do nothing. Bewailing and lamenting your manifold sins does not in itself make up for them. Scouring your soul in a frenzy of spring cleaning only sterilizes it. It does not give it life. On Good Friday, finally, we are all mourners and mockers alike, reduced to the same impotence. Someone else is doing the terrible work that gives life to the world. So on Good Friday, a most unusual of days, for we are to mourn and weep on this day, and at the same time, in a way, celebrate that there is someone else, though we cannot fix our problems, there is someone else who has come and in great suffering done what we cannot do for us. So today we recognize these facts. Today, with James, or listening to James, we do be wretched and mourn and weep, and let our laughter today be turned to mourning and our joy to gloom as we contemplate and look today at the cross of Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.